Kevin?
Absolutely.
Ready?
Yep.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Denton. I'd like to call the meeting of 3/17/21 of the State Board of Plumbing Examiners to order. The time is 10:05. Helen, who will later be introduced to you, would you please call the roll?
Okay, Frank Denton,
Here.
James Ron Ainsworth.
Here.
Okay, Ben Friedman,
Here.
Milton Gutierrez.
Here.
Okay, Robert Janos,
Here.
Bill Clock. Okay, Bill's not with us. Justin McDonald.
Good morning, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. And Mark Silvesta.
Here.
Okay, I believe we have a full board here with exception of Bill. And at this time, Bill has involved in, been tied up with some business issues as well as had a death in the family. So I'm assuming that's why he's not here. Is there a motion to excuse Bill's absence today?
Second.
Motion and a second to excuse Bill Clock's absence. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Well, good morning, and a lot has happened since we last met. When we met back in January, we were unsure of how long our board assignments were going to end up lasting. Legislation had yet to be filed concerning the plumbing board. As you recall, in the last legislative session, there was a bill filed and actually passed the Senate and failed in the House, transferring our agency to the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. I'm happy to report that this year in this legislative session, the senator who carried the piece of sunset legislation abolishing our board and transferring us to TDLR has had a change of heart and has shown a great deal of confidence in our new board as well as our agency to fix some of the issues that were brought up by sunset. Senator Nichols has refiled his bill that passed the Senate this last session, but removing any reference to abolishment of the board or transfer to TDLR. It's basically kept intact the bill that was passed through the Senate the last time. We owe a great deal of thanks to Senator Nichols for this change in heart. I have spent several hours, both in person and over the phone with Senator Nichols, assuring him of our ability and going over the credentials of our board members and our plan going forward. And he has demonstrated a real act of confidence in us taking care of the issues. So I'm happy to report that is off the table. In addition to that, Sinfronia Thompson, who was our hero last year, who basically stopped that bill from passing in the House and keeping the board intact, has filed a bill in the House, keeping the board intact and giving us clear direction and legislative authority to accomplish the goals that we need to accomplish. That's also found in they're not identical, but those same elements are also found in Senator Nichols' bill. Also, Senator Whitmire has filed a companion bill to Representative Thompson's bill in the Senate. So we basically have three bills that have been filed, none of which mention any abolishment of the agency nor transfer to another agency. We are in as good a position, I believe, that we could be in. For the last 12 or 18 months, that's been the goal of this agency and this board is to keep the board intact. And I think we are exactly there right now. There have been other bills that have been filed having to do with plumbing, none of which there's any mention of abolishing the board. There are bills concerning education and various things. I think the legislature has shown a high degree of confidence in the agency and the board going forward, and I'm very, very appreciative of that. And I should say, and I'm going to say this because I'm a board member, but all of the problems or the concerns of the legislature were not aimed at the industry. They were aimed at us on the board, and they were aimed at the agency, having to do with efficiencies and our ability to get the things done. And I have assured them we're going to take care of this. And I have a high degree of confidence we can do it. Do any of the board members have any comments or further comments about the legislation that's been filed or where we are right now before we move forward?
I do.
Mr. Jones?
Well, again, I want to thank our chairman for being so diligent in trying to, pushing this stuff through with the governor's office and with the legislature. It's a complete 180 degree turn from where we were before. Reading the legislation just puts a big smile on my face, as it should the rest of our industry. And I'm glad that that they've come around and realized how important this agency is. And we're going to only get better. I can assure you that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I will say the confidence that's been demonstrated is not with me, but it's with the agency and the board. So anyway, I couldn't be more pleased in where we are right now. One of the things that we had talked about at our last meeting was the fact that we are not, before I go forward and talk about board assignments, I want to introduce to you, and I don't know that you can see him on our screen, but we have with us today Dave Yelovich. Dave has recently been appointed, I guess this last month, as a member of our board. Dave is not yet been confirmed by the Senate. So as such, I have asked Dave to attend as my guest to our board meeting so that he could be up to speed when he is confirmed, and we anticipate that to happen shortly. But since he is not confirmed and not officially a board member, he will not be able to participate in any discussion or votes that we might take today. But he is here today with us, and once we get Senate confirmation, we'll do a more formal introduction and let him introduce himself and talk a little bit about his background. I will say that he has been appointed to fill the statutory capacity of the home building representative. Works for Tillerson Homes, I believe. And I've had the opportunity to speak with him. He has a wealth of knowledge. He's going to be a real strong addition to our board, and we can't wait to work with him. Just a little bit of explanation. None of us new board members, there are 5 of us who were appointed in December, and we haven't been confirmed by the Senate either. We're also subject to Senate confirmation. And the way that works, if you're appointed when the legislature is not in session, you are allowed to take your position on the board and act as a board member, even that you're subject to Senate confirmation. If you're appointed when the Senate is in session, then you have to await Senate confirmation in order to officially take your position on the board. So that's the difference between the two. And if you think about it, it makes absolutely good sense. The legislature only meets once every 2 years. So if you had a huge vacancy on a board 1 month after the legislature was not in session, you'd have a vacancy for 2 years before you could fill those spots. So there is a provision in there if you're appointed during a non-legislative time you're able to take your position quickly. So we had discussed at our last board meeting that at this particular time, I'm not going to appoint committees. I guess that our board itself is going to be a committee to look at all the issues for the time being. But with that being said, I've spoken to individual board members and have asked them to focus on various areas that are in line with their expertise and their interest. And all the rules that we take up and discuss and address, I've asked each board member to focus on a particular area to ensure we don't do something unintentionally to disenfranchise any of our goals. And the three goals of this board and this agency, as I see them today, is number one, public safety first and foremost. Number two is the efficiency of our agency to deliver the job that we're supposed to do. And number three is to try to put more plumbers to work in a robust economy as best that we possibly can that meet our standards. And with that in mind, all of our goals and all of our efforts are going to be focused toward that. Bill Clark, who's not with us today, is statutorily appointed to the board as a licensed engineer. And as such, Bill has got a great deal of experience in working in multiple states using his Texas license. So for that reason, I'd ask Bill to work on and be focused on reciprocity agreements with other states and opportunities that we might have in working out some type of reciprocity agreements, as well as looking at other certification programs that provide substantially equivalent standards as ours does. So Bill's going to be focusing on that. Ben Freeman has indicated an interest in enforcement and outreach. So Ben will be kind of focusing and taking a look at all we do to make sure it's consistent with our goals. Justin, who is a commercial builder, he and I have talked about the various barriers to entry and upward mobility within our industry. And Justin is going to focus on any opportunities we have to eliminate barriers to entry and upward mobility with our industry. Mark Savasta is a licensed plumbing inspector out of Houston. He's forgotten more about plumbing than I even know. And he is going to take a look to make sure that whatever rules we pass are not contrary or disenfranchise local municipalities in their enforcement efforts. Robbie, who is a longtime member of the board and has worn every hat and on every subject at the board, has done considerable work on education and continuing education. So Robbie's going to stay focused on that. Ron Ainsworth and I have visited a site that we look to expand our examination program. So Ron is going to help us and focus on both our written and our practical exam and a expansion of what our plans are that we'll talk about just a little bit later. Milton and I are going to freelance. We're going to look at all those issues. And as opportunities present themselves, or each board member takes a look at our rules and has an idea that will provide a benefit to our industry, keeping in mind our three objectives, you can bring those to me and we'll put them on as an agenda item for a full discussion of the board. I want to warn the board members in performance of your work. Remember your training and don't fall into the temptation of bouncing some ideas off several board members before you bring them to the board. We are not allowed to have any discussion or make any decisions outside the public realm. So any discussion that we have about ideas or initiatives or things of that nature has to be done in a public forum. So resist the temptation to bounce your ideas off other board members so as not to violate the Open Meetings Act. Just remember your training. Any questions or comments about those assignments or? Okay. I believe that I'm done for the time being. Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you for, you have got a lot to say. You've been a busy young lady for a while. So Lisa, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. I liked the young part because we're all feeling pretty worn out right now. We worked really hard. Staff's worked through COVID, through the storm, through power outages, through everything. But I think we found the bright side, which is we've got a little over 2,400 plumbers in addition to our regularly licensed plumbers out working. And just so everybody knows on our storm situation, I want to say that we looked at a lot of the, we worked with the governor's office. We looked at different groups of plumbers that we had to work from, and quite a few individuals that were lined up, had met the qualifications. They're apprentices, but they were ready to take the exam. They'd submitted and their application had been approved. And that was the first group that we pulled out to work under the governor's exemptions. And as far as I know, those have worked out really, really well. And we started out with a little over 500 of them. And as we've gotten applications in and as the need continues, we'll prepare to authorize some more of those individuals. We also had a lot of folks that have retired or left the industry and chose to come back to assist in the disaster recovery. And we've done a lot of work on those folks. The majority of them had retired. Quite a few had gone to other fields, such as the oil fields, and left the industry. And for whatever reason, anyhow, we've had an enormous response to that. It is quite an undertaking going back and reviewing their qualifications and if they meet the current situations. And we had to quickly develop an application to make that work, to be able to track those individuals. And I want everyone to realize that we didn't just open the door for people that stepped away from the industry. There was a reason why some stepped away. And so we looked at that very carefully, made sure we had good identification, and most definitely reviewed to ensure that if there was any past criminal convictions, that those were addressed. And so as of this date, those individuals are probably reaching about 400. I know there's about 40 that are in there for review right now that we had some investigations to do. So it's a lot of work. A lot of people have joined in. Staff's worked night and day. The phones have rang, and I appreciate everybody's patience out in the industry for all the regular people that we serve on a daily basis. We also did a lot of work with the out-of-state folks, and I assure you, if there's anyone working in-state that has followed the procedures, and if they are a company that came in to work, they have insurance that on our form, signed by an agent, they're temporarily licensed, they're properly insured. We've had quite a few apprentices come from other states. In particular, we had several from Louisiana and New Mexico. And there's about 52 people, not counting the number of apprentices and not counting the number of apprentices and the as well as the number of journeymen that they may have brought. They're working on several journeymans this morning, so I expect to add another about 10 or so. So it's exciting. It's a lot of additional work. We're happy to do it. Along with all the other things that we're doing, we've got a full board. We're just on pace for so many things, and everything's exciting and staff's excited. And speaking of staff, I want to say Helen spoke up earlier, but Helen Kelly, for those of you that don't remember or do remember, I'm sorry, Helen was employed here at TSBPE in a previous life as an attorney. And we did some finagling and said, hey, Helen, are you sure you don't want to come back? I said, we've got a lot of exciting stuff going on. And lo and behold, she agreed to come back, and we're thrilled. I was saddened when she left the first time, and it's a great relief for me. So all the things that we've been storing up for an attorney we have piled upon her desk, and it's we've got a lot of work to do, and I think she's up to it. So thanks, Helen. I'm glad to have you. And you'll notice we're short Dawn today. So Dawn's out on spring break. And so Kevin and I have been running around crazy, and Kevin's been doing a lot of work on the board meeting and working with the out-of-state folks. So staff's been busy in many, many ways. And I also want to say a lot of the plumbers have called, visited, and just we've seen photos of things that you wouldn't believe that have never happened before. We had freezes, and I've worked in freezes for many, many times, but it's different this time. Things that never busted before, they busted this time. People that have been without this time is the enormity of it, and it continues on. The plumbers have done a great job of rallying, pulling in people from out of states, communicating with us. And I want to say I appreciate everybody that has been communicating with us via email, because it has been a little easier to communicate via email than to try to answer the phone. And along those lines, if you do leave us a message, it goes to an email and we see it more quickly. So don't hang up if we don't answer. But the industry has done really good. And as far as I know, there's always going to be complaints. There's not an enormous amount of complaints this go around. And so that's really pleasing that the industry pulled together and has jumped out there and done what we needed to do. So anyhow, wanted to update on the storm first off. And we also have a couple of other things that I can cover, Mr. Denton, if you'd like. I don't know if you want to do those revocations now or later too. I have revocations.
We'll get to that in just a moment.
Okay. We also have ran quite a few of the numbers trying to keep pace with this and determine what we have and who we have. And I'm going to tell you, the online usage, last time we were at about 87%. That's gone up 2 more percent. I'd like to get somewhere around 90, 92. We'd really be something if we were that far online. Everybody's done really well. We've also turned on a few other items for the applicants within our Versa online system. And I want to say this publicly because it's very important, and it'll expedite the processing of applications. You can now upload your documents inside the online application. You don't have to worry about paper. You don't have to worry about sending in the receipt or anything like that. It's all in one package now. And we put it out for a test run, and everyone that has tried it has done really well on it. And so Kevin, if you didn't know this, Kevin, will be writing some instructions on exactly how to use it. But so far, when we put it out with no instructions, that's what we wanted to see, how the test went. People picked right up on it, and it's just made a wonderful addition. So it's on. And also for new board members and for old board members, I was going to talk about our numbers. And I gave you on the Google link some of the numbers of our applicants. And these numbers were as of March 1st. I could not rerun them right at the moment. And whenever I run these and present these to you, these numbers are based on our workload. And remember, you may have a journeyman that has a journeyman master and an inspector. So that's our workload, but that warm body is a separate count. And in particular in inspectors, when you get those, that's also a warm body count. But I just got them for the end of this quarter because it's what I could grab the quickest. And so that 1292 on the inspectors, those are current warm bodies that we count as inspectors. Now, if all those inspectors renewed, there would be 1,539, but they don't all renew at one time. So by the time I get finished speaking, there may be another 2 or 3 that renew. But I wanted you to realize the inspectors at the top of your page, we count those as warm bodies. But when you go down and you look at that master number may also have some inspectors in it. So as you work your way down, you might have the same individual, but holds a master. And then that same individual may also hold a journeyman. So whenever I give you a total at the bottom, those are licenses and endorsements and the things that we handle. And I want you to make sure that that distinction's there. Because if you took all the warm bodies at this moment that are current, which this won't be completely accurate, but it's the only way I can pull it. It'd be 52,298. That's all the warm bodies. But out of those 52,298, several of those people may have more than one license. So wanted to make sure that everyone is clear on that. And it changes daily. And the best time to get the numbers are, and that's what's going to be exciting right now, is to get it after the end of this renewal period, whenever all of the storm people are completely processed and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see that.
Lisa,
Yes, sir.
hey, this is Ben.
Hi, Ben.
While we're on the topic of the storm, I know that there's a lot of viewers of our board meeting today that are interested in what we've been able to do with regard to unlicensed complaints, how people are referred to the AG's office for price gouging. There's a whole lot of concern out in the marketplace about this. And so I would like to ask you to take a few minutes to let the people know that are watching, what is the board doing and how can we assure the public that we're taking the proper precautions to deal with the unlicensed that are running everywhere right now, taking care of people, because people are hiring them, obviously, right? So if people are hiring them, that presents an issue because we're on the backside of that. So can you explain to the public how we're handling some of the complaints that are coming in?
Absolutely. And you know, people when they're stressed and they have an emergency situation and things that are vital to their everyday existence are gone, they can be, you know, they may reach out and grab the first thing that comes along. And unfortunately, there's people that are riding the areas and knocking on doors and that sort of thing. And they're unlicensed. They may not be skilled. It's hard to say. And we certainly don't want it to run rampant. But we've had our field investigators out rotating, performing compliance checks, checking on those individuals. And they've gone out on Saturdays. They've gone out on Sundays. Steve went out on a Saturday and a Sunday, I believe, Steve Davis, along with the other field investigators. And we've been out in neighborhoods and places that we know to be areas with a lot of damage. So we're out there. We wish we had more people out there, but we are out there. We've received, I'm going to say this number is off the top of my head, There's probably about 25 different complaints. And we've spoken with the AG's office, and the AG's office receives a lot of complaints that might start out as someone believes they were price gouged. And they look at that from a price gouging aspect, but they also send that complaint to us. And we look at it as an overall complaint. Were they properly licensed? Did they accurately and truthfully represent what they were getting and that sort of thing? Because we've made it clear we don't regulate pricing, but we do regulate how they represent the types of items that a plumber might have performed. We've also been out and made it very clear how important it is to use a skilled and licensed individual. And I'm going to tell you, I can't even count the number of media inquiries. And Frank's been gracious during this whole storm and said, what do you want me to do? And I kept giving him media things, and we've been out and reached out and tried to make people aware that they need to be licensed and the benefits of that. And we will, as we get a complaint, and if we have the kind of evidence we need, we'll take the proper action on them where need be. And a lot of it is, there was such a response and such a need that in one particular case, there's people that could have held a license and they never stepped up and got that license. And by us being out there and reaching out and visiting with that individual, come to find out, they could have been licensed. And so I don't know how many of those we're going to find like that, but so there's all kinds of things that can happen during this. And we got to look at the bright side, which is someone that was illegal should have been working more closely towards getting legal, and now they are. So those are the kind of things that we've been able to address. But I can assure, I know you know this is true, Ben. There's more of those people than there are of us. And the plumbers have been very good about also sending in information whenever they spot items that are of high concern. So,
Well, there's no doubt. I mean, the plumbers are on the front line. Excuse me. You mentioned something about media inquiries and networks, whoever coming to you guys for information. What's the board's policy on doing interviews? Who does the interviews? What sort of messages are you putting out when you have these opportunities?
well, this particular time, we've all been very, very busy. And as I mentioned, Frank's been gracious enough to just take the whole pile of them and talk to everybody. And I feel confident in it. And if he wants to go over the message that he's been sending out, I'm sure he will. But most of the inquiries we've had are, how do you get a license? How many plumbers do you have? What sort of things can a plumber do or an unlicensed person do, which is not much, that sort of stuff. And it's been all over the state. And we've had inquiries from other states as well, because we've had people coming here working with different groups to make repairs and stuff like that. So some of the states that actually knew that people were coming here, they called too. So it's been all over the map. So.
Lisa, can I chime in on that just a second? Ben, to your point, I did maybe 8 or 10 TV interviews and probably that many more inquiries from printed media. And basically you're responding to their questions. Most of their questions had to do with out-of-state plumbers and what regulations. But I can tell you this with absolute assurance. I never did an interview with TV or with the printed media when they asked me, what advice would you give the public? And I told them to be patient and wait for a licensed plumber. It's the most prudent action that the consumer can take. So there was never, ever an interview that we didn't talk about the importance of waiting on a licensed plumber to ensure that it's done correctly. So I think we're keyed in on that.
Yeah, it's an
Your
excellent message.
question on what we're going to do on media inquiries. I think we need to have a spokesperson. This particular time, I ended up being that spokesperson. I don't think it's good or prudent policy to have several spokespeople for the agency. It may be Lisa or a member of the staff that handles it next time. It may be me again, but I don't think it's prudent for each of us individually as board members to be giving mixed messages. So I will just say this, although this kind of got forced upon us, we weren't prepared for a spokesperson or a script to follow. I just did it, and I think it worked out okay. I'm not aware of any negative media coverage we got. To the contrary, I know this was a tragic occurrence, but Lisa, I think, will attest to this. When we went to she and I have appeared before several House committees and Senate committees. The legislature really appreciates what the plumbers have done in this crisis situation. This has worked to our advantage. They have a favorable outlook to the plumbers and what they did to rise up to the occasion. I believe the governor's office is extremely proud of our response. And I'm going to just say this. If I ever had a doubt of this agency's ability to work or willingness to work, that doubt went away during this most recent freeze. We had Lisa and a group of her core employees were up here working, trying to process out-of-state plumbers and get working with the governor's office every single day during and after the freeze. And many of those employees with their own personal crisis at home with busted pipes and no water, no electricity. So there is a work ethic and a culture here that I'm really proud to be a part of. I was speaking to Lisa at 10 o'clock at night and 5 o'clock in the morning, and we were emailing and texting each other back and forth and never a cross word. So I could not be prouder of the response personally. And I think it was looked upon favorably by the legislature as well as the governor's office. So
Well,
good job, Lisa and staff.
That was my kind of my subconscious point of what I wanted to hear, and what I wanted the public to hear was the advantages that the board has with an unfortunate situation. We're all, everybody's pipes froze. I mean, even my pipes froze, and it was horrible. Power was out. That's a whole nother story. But the fact that we're looked at because of our ability as an industry and a cohesiveness team on the board has really shed the light on us, a very bright light that's very positive. And so I just wanted to make sure that that message was being pushed out and people are hearing it. And it sounds like, in the legislature with your efforts there, it's being heard loud and clear. Thank you.
We also prepared a written response, and it went to all the legislatures, and it has the number of the different categories and the items that we've worked on, and just it's a rally is what it is, and we've been calling it a rally, rallying the plumbers. And we sent it out to the board members as well. And what it has on it, it has a photo, and we'll put this out on the website, but this particular photo that's on this document, it froze and busted. But if you look at this photo and you look at the quality of the joint, it's a two-fold photo that shows you bad quality in installation, did not survive a freeze. And so when you get a chance, take another look at it if you haven't already looked at it, and we'll pass that around for the providers as well. But we've sent that out. But it was a bad fitting, and it was barely put together, and it blew apart. Had that been a properly made fitting, it could possibly, depending upon the wall thickness of the piping, it could possibly have survived the freeze. Who knows? But we've done a lot of work, and we appreciate all those kind words too.
And Lisa, I don't think I got a copy of that. Would y'all mind
Okay.
sending that back around,
Sure.
please? Thanks.
And the other thing that we've done, in case the plumbers don't all know this, we worked with, and boy, it was some late nights, I'm going to tell you. We worked with the Texas Department of Emergency Management, and we got one of our files uploading into a program to where you can click on it, put a zip code in, and it'll come up with the list of plumbing companies in that area. And it's really neat, and they're going to actually support that for us henceforth. And they're amazing over there, and we worked and we tested and we put it together until we got it done as quick as we could. And you got to remember, we had a week with no power in this office and very little power. I had no power at home either. So we were charging stuff in the cars and working with laptops and on the phone. And I can tell you, Gloria and I were both shivering, but working and on the phone to each other. It's the craziest thing you've ever seen, but we made it all happen. And
Lisa, I've got to laugh and add something. Lisa was trying to, of course, all of this is going on with all these out-of-state plumbers and all these chaos and no power. And she was trying to work with the Department of Homeland, it's Department of Emergency Management. And those folks have got more money than the state of Georgia in their budget. And she was speaking to someone and he said, well, why don't you just put me in touch with your webmaster? Like we've got a webmaster here. She said, well, you're speaking to your webmaster, as a matter of fact. But it,
yeah, my actual deal was just a moment, let me put a different hat. But yeah, they are amazing people over there, and worked with their groups, and it was great. And then we got another guy, and Kevin. In addition to Kevin, Kevin's been wearing so many hats lately, it's unreal. But in addition, we had to reach back out to someone that had helped us on our website before, and we had to quickly get some updates on our website, which was down for a few days, and then we got it back up. And I don't know, sometimes the fight, you got to want to make it, you got to make it happen. So it was good, but we'll keep you updated, and just every little thing that we can find out and tell you about, we'll make sure you're aware of it. Any other questions on that? I'll be happy to answer them.
thank you, Lisa. You know, a couple of things I want to say with respect to the disaster. I could not have been happier with the response of the agency, with a skeleton staff of how they responded to it. But it will not be the last disaster that we have. A lot of what they did was a result of previous disasters. And one of the things we're going to do, Ben, kind of in response to your line of questioning a while ago, we need to go ahead and prepare today, or at some point in time, written responses of how we're going to respond, and have it on the shelf, so that when whatever the disaster is, whether it's a hurricane or a freeze or whatever it is, we have got immediate response. We found ourselves trying to prepare written documents to respond to the legislature and what we're doing, and how are we going to respond to the governor's request. The governor, we had a conference call that the governor himself spoke with us, offering his support and help, just for us to tell him what we needed from him in order to respond to the disaster. So we intend, and I know we've learned from this. I think the agency was, quite frankly, it wasn't formal, but I think they were prepared based upon previous responses to emergency situations. But we're going to be even more prepared for the next one. The other thing I want to say with respect to the disaster, I mentioned the governor's emergency orders, and I cannot go forward without saying this is the plumbers. It has generated a tremendous amount of work for plumbers. And I've spoken to maybe 15 different plumbing companies across the state, from El Paso to South Texas to Dallas to Houston. And I think I think this will be consistent with what the board believes, but their first wave or first week was strictly triage. And they think in 2, maybe 3 weeks, they can pretty well have everyone triaged and back with functioning water and sewer. And now it's going to be lasting longer, maybe a matter of months, that they'll be circling back and finishing what they started just to get people operable again. So I believe that's my feel for where we are on this now. Do any of the board members feel any differently, or
Frank, I can
hearing-
offer some input. Being in the field, working for a small company with 4 trucks, you're right on the money with your timeline. We had triage for probably the first week and a half. We don't normally work weekends, but we did that first week after we couldn't go to work Monday through Thursday up here. The roads were impassable. Those plumbing companies that got out there, I commend them. We just weren't going to send our trucks out for the liability reasons. But that first week we were triage, we were capping, we were opening walls, we were trying to reconnect what we could. The next week, we were circling back around if we had to. And then the third week, which is what we're in right now, we're already back to our existing customer base, only 5 or 6 days out. So we've seen it kind of come full circle, and we're still fixing small little breaks on pipes that may not be of use to a homeowner at this moment, but now they're seeing that they need it, like a hydrant, for example, on the outside wall. We take care of that. But business is normal, business as usual here. I can't speak for the other plumbing companies, but that existing customer base is what has kept us very busy, not really even taking new customers at this point. So I know everybody has been really busy, at least on that level.
The other thing that I want to mention before we leave the disaster situation, I want the industry to know that it's not unnoticed. Part of the governor's executive orders adversely affected and hit hard the providers of continuing education. One of the emergency orders waived the requirement of getting CE credits during the crisis situation. And that directly hit some of our providers who already had classes scheduled, and it hit them in the pocketbook, and it's not unnoticed. And I think that that the providers that I spoke to weren't happy about it, but they weren't complaining about it. They realized that it was a necessity to respond to the citizens of Texas, and I certainly appreciate their understanding and recognize the financial loss that they suffered as a result of these emergency orders. But I think we all understand it was just something that had to be done, and we had to do it in order to try to respond to the needs of Texas. So the other issue that before I leave and move on to the next agenda item, Lisa gave an explanation of the numbers that she was reporting, basically because she's dealing with a chairman who has average intelligence and has a difficult time trying to understand things. When I looked at that report, I assumed, and it was my fault, that that's the number of plumbers that are actually out in the field working. And that's not the case. What it is, it's a reflection of the workload of the agency. It's not the actual number of plumbers that are out there working. The number that are of bodies that are actually out there working is much less than the numbers that we were showing. So anyway, that explanation was for my benefit. And we've talked about less reporting, but I would like, since that's our ultimate goal, is to get more plumbers working, I would like to have a number that actually shows the bodies that are out there working in addition to the workload of what the agency is doing, so that we can monitor to see how well we're doing. If our goal is to get more plumbers in the workplace, we need to start not measuring how hard the agency is working, but how many plumbers are we actually putting in the field going to work. So anyway, that explanation was because of my misunderstanding when I first read that report. So Anyone else have anything on the disaster or the agency before we move ahead? Okay. Next item on our agenda is item number 5. And item number 5, those of you who were here at our last meeting might remember this. We have 6 individuals whose licenses or registrations have previously been revoked for various reasons. They have now reapplied for relicensure or registration and have been reviewed by the enforcement committee, and the enforcement committee is recommending we approve their re-registration or ability to take the examination. These are found in your packets, and I'm assuming folks have looked over them. If unless you have any questions or want to discuss any of them individually, it would be in order. A motion would be in order to recommend approval of these 6 applicants.
Mark Sebastis, so made.
Is there a second?
Ben, second.
Ben seconds. Let me add, before we take a vote on that, Lisa, is this one that I have to have authorization to sign these, or are these, all we need is board action?
That one needs authorization.
Okay, so Mark, is it okay to amend your motion to approve them for reexamination or registration and authorizing the chair to sign the documents necessary to effectuate that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And is that consistent with your second? Who seconded that?
Yes, Ben.
Ben,
second.
is that okay with you?
Yes, sir.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Item number 6. Board members, this is something that will never happen to you again. All of these documents and rule changes, we had a tremendous amount of them to do. And Helen, who also I want to welcome on board, she got initiated by fire. She came here and we really threw the book at her with a lot to do. And then they had the freeze, and then she had a personal family issue to deal with. And she's done an excellent job. But I want to make clear to you that the rules that are in your packet and we're going to discuss today are strictly for discussion only. Robbie, last year, those having to do with continuing education, Robbie last year participated in a town hall with the providers and got lots of input from the providers of some needed changes. And Helen, to the best of her ability, is trying to incorporate many of those changes in these rule documents that are in your packet today. These are only for your discussion and take a look at them and for input and further direction to the staff. We anticipate, and I believe, and I've decided this morning, normally we would have rules that would come before the board. We would vote on them as a proposal. It'd be posted in the Texas Register. We'd get public comment, and then they'd be brought back for final adoption. This time, I believe that I'm going to give everyone 2 bites out of the apple. It's pretty extensive. And I've talked with Lisa this morning, and she's got the ability after the meeting or sometime today or first thing tomorrow to put these rule revisions that we're going to be discussing today on some type of Google app, so that anyone who is interested in looking at these rough drafts can access those documents and provide written comment. So you're going to get 2 bites out of the apple. You're going to get a comment and your input prior to us even having a formal proposal of these rules. And hopefully by our next meeting, we will have fine-tuned this to the point that we can actually bring them in to vote on as a proposal and submit them to the Texas Register. So if after the meeting, and Lisa will give us some instruction on that later of how to access that, we're going to make these documents open to the public. But keep in mind, and I'm going to do that with the understanding providers, don't freak out if something is not exactly as it should be. These are rough draft documents, first draft documents. They're not going to be identical to what you're seeing on the website. So don't freak out if it's not exactly your understanding. We've got plenty of time to modify them and correct them before they brought back to the board for a formal proposal for the Texas Register. Helen, let me ask a question. With respect to the examination, practical and written examination, is that found in chapter 363 or 365?
363.
Good. It's item number A.
Yes.
And I want to lay this out to the board for discussion and comment. I don't think there is any question in my mind. The number one priority item for this agency at this particular moment in time is working through the backlog of people that we've got awaiting taking the examinations. Our staff has done an outstanding job in trying to put as many people as they can through the examination program that we have existing. I'm going to start out at the end. When we're going to systemically change a system that has been in place for 50 years, every plumber in the state of Texas has come to Austin. They've taken the examination in our facility. We are, over the next few months, are going to transition this out. You've already heard about us going to computer-based testing, but we're also going to expand the number of testing sites that we have. Eventually, we're going to be all over the state of Texas. We're going to have one in El Paso, South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston. Neil, our director of examination, wants one in Beaumont. I've got a lot to say about what's been done, but it is absolutely unprecedented, the level of cooperation that I have received in trying to expand these testing centers. The Plumbers Union, who has got several excellent training facilities located throughout the state, has basically offered those to us free of charge to come in and do our test. Not them do the test, but our personnel do the test and utilize their facility. Waco, Texas State Technical Institute in Waco has offered their facility at no charge for us to dispatch our examination staff to do the test. PHCC, who Ron and I visited a few weeks ago, they have offered their facility free of charge. And I don't have any doubt they're not the only ones who are willing to cooperate. It's a big deal for them to claim their facility is a official testing site for State Board of Plumbing examiners. So I think the level of cooperation could not be greater than what we've had, and we've got to take advantage of it. It's not something I did. It's been out there for a long time, but we're going to take advantage of it. The way I visualize this, and we have to go into this and to change something that's so intrinsic in the agency, we're going to have a shared vision going forward, because it's not going to be without problems. But over a period of months, I would like to see us expand our testing facilities short term. Step one, or plan A, is expand from the Austin facility to 2 additional facilities, one located in Waco at the college, the other one at PHCC. soon to be followed third by a union facility in Houston, all of which have been offered us free of charge. Initially, we're going to staff those facilities, and the examination personnel are going to be the same 4 that we use today. We're going to have some additional capacity because once we farm out the written portion of the exam, those exam personnel who were monitoring or writing herd over folks taking a written exam will no longer have that responsibility. The testing facility will have 40 sites across the state who are able to offer that written exam. So it's going to free up to a certain extent the examination personnel that we have. And Neil's, our director of examinations, suggestion, and I think it's a good one, is let's start with the 2 facilities that we can reach, commute to. Basically, we don't have to fly anywhere or drive anywhere and spend overnight. Let's see if it works. And just as an example, and I'm not sure how accurate my numbers are, let's assume that we're doing 10 tests a day, 5 days a week is 50 tests. If we're able to pick up an additional 5 in Waco and 5 in Buda, then we doubled our capacity to work down the backlog. And we can keep 3 people, examination staff here in Austin to continue to the flow of examinations going through, and dispatch 1 to each of those 2 facilities. And that will give us some immediate relief, hopefully, to work down the backlog. Now, that's one thing. But the other thing, and we heard this at the legislature, and it's a valid complaint, it is a huge burden for those people in Amarillo, El Paso, Corpus Christi, Harlingen, to travel all the way to Austin, or even Buda, or even Waco, in order to take that examination. So once we make these pilot programs work, then my thought is we will expand to all 4 corners of the state with these types of facilities that folks are going to offer to us. And you might say, well, how are 5 examination staff going to cover 5 or 6 locations? What I hope that we will do is we will recruit a pool of retired master plumbers who will be trained by and certified by or authorized by our examination staff to actually perform those examinations in these remote locations. Our staff will train them, we'll approve them, and we'll monitor their activity to ensure they're following the exact same standards that we are. And by doing so, we can basically have unlimited capacity forever. We will never again be a stumbling block. So if someone has got a better idea, now is the time to let's talk about it. It's not without obstacles. It's been pointed out to me that we can't accept these facilities free of charge because it'd be considered a gift. I've also been told we can't lease it because we don't have the authority to enter into a contract. Now, all that may be right or wrong. I'm not sure. I'm not totally convinced yet. But even if that is the case, Lisa and I have talked about this extensively, and we believe the best course of action is once we engage this third-party testing company to give the written exam, that they also start scheduling the practical test. And our job is that we've got 20 sites available next Tuesday, 5 in Buda, 5 in Waco, 10 in Austin. And once they pass that test, then they just start filling up those sites with people who have passed the written exam. Our job at the agency is to make sure that we have a test examiner in place in order to conduct those tests. And that might either be our own personnel, or it might be someone that we've authorized to do the test. Now, there's lots of things we're going to work out. And I mean, this is just but we have to have a shared vision of this working in order for it to go forward. Ron, since you visited the facility up there, do you have any comments either or concerns going forward that you want to share with the board?
Well, you and I did visit the Buddha site and quite emulated quite well to the shop here in the facility. Maybe a little challenge with the number of stations, like the doll houses. I don't think, you can have with 5 people, and they only had, I think, 2 doll houses. So there will be some logistics issue of getting those people in and out, but very impressed with the facility and the ability to administer the test.
I agree. And those are, we have the same thing in Waco. They've got a limited capacity there too. But this is nothing that can't be overcome. We have got to commit that we're going to do it. And we'll just take care of those problems as we get to them. I mean, I'm open if somebody's got a better idea.
Question, and I don't know the answer to this, but here in the Austin facility, are all the doll houses being utilized?
In the Austin facility?
Yes.
Yeah. And every day, now we did buy 2.
You muted.
Hang on. We recently purchased 2 additional smaller doll houses, and those were to use for practice in anticipation of the smaller ones being able to be moved to another location. But they're all used every day. But the 2 small ones are portable. And when I say small, we call them a half house. And if you think about it, you're only using a portion of the house to do the rough end anyway. But those 2 can be put up on a table and moved onto a skid, and we anticipate being able to move those. And we have access to get more of those made.
That was my next question. What is, if you ordered another one, what's the timeline to get them?
The gentleman that built those is in the Houston area, and it's based on how much other work he's got going. He produced those in about 6 weeks or so. He came and we worked with him to set up the model and how we wanted it. And then after we found some other modifications we thought that it needed to have, and added some mobility to it and things like that. And the way that we've got it perfected now, I'd say we can produce them a little bit more quickly now, but it was getting him to be able to make it based on our size and specifications.
One thing we need to be mindful of is we can't favor one segment of the industry over the other segment of the industry. So if there's anyone out there in the state that has the facilities and the willingness to participate with us to set up as a testing site, everyone is going to be eligible to do it. So how many people we have to fill up the slots is going to determine how much we use it. So, but we've got to start with a pilot program, expanding to 2 additional locations to make sure it works and what we need and what our criteria are for future sites before we can move forward. And I think it's also important to note that all of the legislation that's been proposed so far, both Senator Nichols' bill, Senator Whitmire's bill, and Representative Thompson's bill, give us clear legislative authority to do what we're about to do. So, and I think in some shape, form, or fashion, those bills are going to go through the legislature, and all these concerns about our ability to contract and all of our, or take gifts and things like that will be not an issue if we turn this over to the third-party testing company. They'll make the arrangements with the facilities to utilize them. We'll supply the personnel to give the examination. They will pay the folks that we get to do these examinations, these master plumbers who might want to come back in and give these exams. All the details have got to be worked out. The only thing I can say is this, that if there are master plumbers out there who are in fact, and I know that there are, so passionate about their industry and they care so much about their industry, I don't think we're going to have a hard time finding plumbers who are willing to donate their time. And we'll pay them something, but they're not going to get rich doing this. It's going to be a labor of love. And I wish we could, but we can't. And I in a sense, I feel it's a lot to ask, but you know, I look at our board here. We don't get paid a nickel for doing this, but yet we do it. We do it out of dedication to efficient government and to your industry. And I think a person who has worked their life and supported their family in the plumbing industry and has decided to step aside and retire, they should be willing and able to give back and help young plumbers get into the industry and advance their career. I think I'm going to be surprised, or I may not be surprised at how many people we have come forward to do that. And by doing it the way we're laying it out by a third party, that's critical. And I'll tell you why it's critical is we don't have to go to the legislature and ask for money to do it. What their fee is going to be paid by the people that utilize the facilities. When an applicant is ready to take a test, they will pay this third party administrator directly, and it won't come through our agency. So therefore, you know, if we on this board, own this agency by ourselves, we'd fix this next week. I mean, it wouldn't take us 2 weeks to get it done. But being a state agency, it just takes a little longer. And it's not a bad thing because the public needs to weigh in on it and it needs to be prudent. And it is our licensees' money and it's public funds. So I'm not complaining about it. It just, if we owned it, we'd be doing it by the 1st of April. But it's just going to take us a matter of time to make sure we've got clear legislative authority to do it. And we have the people in place to do it. But the staff's already working on it. Neil is working up a list of things that have to be present in order to utilize these facilities. We're already kicking around criteria that a licensed examination specialist has to meet. We're going to have to make sure they have no conflict of interest. They can't have an active business they're working on. They can't be examining their own students. There are a number of things that are going to have to be worked out, and we'll just take them as we get to them. But I believe it's a viable solution, and I think it'll work. And I think that this time at the end of the year, we're going to be in place, up and running with no backlog, and we'll never have another backlog again. And Lisa and I talked, once we get this computerized testing in place, and once we get these remote locations in place, and once we do the things that we're talking about on our next segment on it, education of aligning all these dates, this agency is going to run like a top. I mean, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be really efficient and run like a top. But I've had some contact from people in response to the legislation that's been filed about wanting this and wanting that. You know, I regret to see that, because 3 months ago, 6 months ago, all anybody wanted was, hey, keep us a standalone agency and let us fix our own problems. They gave us exactly what we asked for. They're allowing us to fix it. And let's not get greedy and try to screw up something that's really good for us by trying to get greedy and get another bite out of the apple or get something else. You know, we didn't get in this situation in one legislative session. It's happened over a period of 20 legislative sessions, and we're not going to fix all of our problems. There's a lot of things I'd love to have in the legislation that's not going to be there, but we've got to be patient and we've got to take incremental steps to fix it. But from my viewpoint, the only thing this board needs to be working on are the things that are our responsibility And that's the efficiency of this agency in reducing this backlog of testing and aligning these dates so that it's easier for the staff to administer the program. So, board members, any comments and I welcome if there's anyone that wants to throw cold water on this. I guess that's the reason I'm trying to throw it out there. It's something Lisa and I have worked hard on, but it's not, doesn't require board approval, but it's very important to me that we have a consensus on our board that we're heading in the right direction. And if any of you feel that we're not, or you think we need to do something differently, I'm really open to hear your comments
Chairman.
or concerns. Yes, sir.
The ideas and the brainstorming is incredible. Sitting here and just thinking about all these things you're talking about just makes my mind start to go wild as well. You mentioned a lot of good ideas, and there's a lot of checks and balances that are going to have to take place when you open these testing centers. I'm assuming the third-party testing centers are going to be written and practical for the dollhouse. Or some
No,
will take care of
what
some,
we
some
will
will
do,
take care of others.
the testing, the third party contractor who will do the written test already has in place, I think it's 40 different, the one we're looking at or talking with at this point has got 40 locations located throughout the state. The person taking the test will go to one of their established sites that they already have, sit down at a computer, answer the questions. And by the time their butt gets off the chair, they'll know whether they, excuse my language, the time they get up out of the chair, they'll know whether they passed or failed that examination.
Okay.
And if they pass, and only if they pass, I visualize that third party tester will then schedule a practical exam. And eventually that practical exam will take place in one of a multitude of sites. We will already have established we're giving 5 tests a day, 4 days, 5 days a week at this location. They'll then plug that person in, and they will schedule that person to take the practical exam at Buda or Waco or Austin to start.
Okay. So currently the way it's set up is they're taking, if they come to Austin, they're taking the practical and the written exam at the same time.
That's
Are
correct.
you suggesting that they would take a written exam first before they would be able to move on to the practical hands-on?
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay, because that's just not the way it works today. Normally, if you
Nothing
do it,
is the way it works today.
right? And I was getting to that in terms of how things are accelerating based on, our world. COVID is what everybody wants to, lean on. But that would be a rule change, would it not?
I'm not sure. We'll just have to look at it. We're going to take it incrementally, one step at a time. I'm just trying to lay out a vision. All the details are yet to be worked out. And certainly if it requires a rule change, we'll do a rule change.
Well, I'm just thinking about who's watching this meeting right now and what their interpretation is, and if they have questions or whatever. But the way I understand it is if I'm signed up to take my tradesman or journeyman test, I'm coming down and I'm going to do the shop work, and then I'm going to take the written exam, and I'm going to find out if I passed all of them or one of them or two of them or none of them, and then get rescheduled. So I'm just wanting to make sure I hear you correctly, is that would not be the current process, the process moving forward.
You are correct. That would not be the process moving forward.
Understand.
If a person is ready to take a written test, they'll first contact us. We'll authorize the testing company that this person is eligible to take the written test. Then that person will schedule, not through us, but through the testing company, a site that they're willing to go sit down and take the examination by computer. They'll already have a list that, yes, they've met the prerequisite and worked the number of hours, they're eligible to take the test. If assuming that they pass that test, then that testing company will have the ability to schedule the practical exam only if they pass the written test. If they don't pass that written test, they're going to have to reschedule and take it again, just like they do here. You won't move to the practical exam until you pass the written test. Correct, Lisa?
I
Isn't
see.
that the way you visualize that?
And I wanted to add too, is right now, the remote locations and the changes that we've made in the written exam, this is all in preparation to move it to computer-based testing, and you'll see that some of the practical items are moved to graphics right now. And so we're learning by trying this in some remote locations too. But the one thing that we have learned is that these people need to take the written exam first before they take the practical. And that's kind of their cue. You pass it and then you're good to go. And right now, whenever they come take the exam, they know by the time they or within an hour, you know, if they've passed it or not, they can look in the system and see it, and they're still going to be able to do that whenever they finish it. But
Okay, good. I just
based
know I
on
had
our research, the majority of other licensing and regulatory types of agencies, they require the written first. So it's not an uncommon thing to take and pass the written first.
Well, again,
Thank
if
you.
we're going
That's
to be,
exactly what I wanted to hear.
if I may comment, you know, it only makes sense if we're going to increase efficiency. If you can't pass the written part, we're consuming a lot of staff time for practical exam that they're not going to pass anyway.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. You know, Frank, when you opened the meeting, you mentioned that you had asked me to look at eliminating barriers to entry, and to me, it seems like streamlining this and you know, weeding those folks out before they waste our time on the practical is a big way to do that. You know, we're making it easier for them to get to the written test and to take the written test. And then if they pass it, then we're also going to make it easier for them to take the practical. But I think, you know, using that first step as a way to kind of weed that out makes a ton of sense to me.
You know, Justin, you and I have talked about this also, and it's not on our agenda today, but just Justin talking about barriers to entry at our next meeting, and I'll, rather than wait until we get to future agenda items, I'll wait to mention this now. Justin and I have talked about it's not clear how one re-enters the industry. And I've asked Helen to take a look at that. And I believe what the agency does is not inconsistent with my vision of the way it should be, or Justin's. I'm a little off topic, but it has to do with barriers to entry. Let's say you've got a tradesman or a journeyman plumber who sees greener grass on the other side of the fence and takes an oil field job offshore or whatever and stays gone for 2 years. Once they have been gone for 2 years, they can't automatically come back and renew their license. 2 years is the magic number. If you do it within 2 years, you're okay, but go beyond 2 years, you can't. As I understand it, when they do try to come back after 2 years, they get full 100% credit for the number of hours that they have spent in the industry, which means that the problem that I see, and Helen has pointed out to me that it's a requirement in the statute. When they come back, they have to come back as an apprentice, register as an apprentice. But once they register as an apprentice, because they've already got the prerequisite hours, they can take the test again the next week and become a journeyman or a master. So my thought was just let them come right back in as a journeyman or right back in as a master. But Helen pointed out to me, and I get corrected a lot, but she pointed out to me that the statute does require that they come back as an apprentice, but that's not clear in the rules. If I were gone for 2 or 3 years and wanted to come back and I read that rule, Yeah, I'm not coming back as an apprentice and working another 6,000 hours to work my way up. So I'd like for the rule to be a little more clearer of what the agency's real practice is, to try to pull people back in to the industry and let them know how easy it is. It's going to be it's a short fix. So.
And they currently have to meet the most current. Can I add something?
Sure.
They also have to meet the most current requirements to get the license. And somebody that got a license back in 1998, the requirements are different. But the rule is a little bit unclear, but they do have to take the exam. And the reason,
Sure.
part of the reason them getting the apprentice is if they're out there working, then it makes them legal. But we could streamline that whole.
But the ease of reentry is not as complex as you might think just reading the rule. It's pretty easy, but we need to make that clear in the rule so that it will make it a little easier and more attractive to re-enter the industry. And it goes along the lines with Justin, what you and I talked about. So we'll see that at our next meeting. I got off track on the examination thing. Any other comments or criticisms? I'm telling you, I'm wide open for it.
I just have one other comment. It's a learning process. And we'll get this figured out. It'd be no problem doing that. But then on the education side, as we start opening up the education side, these individuals will be much more prepared to take the written and the practical, and hopefully our pass rates go way up. Because one of the laws that they're recommending is giving us the authority to, along with the Board of Education, to set up, these schools and what's required in order for them to get the requisite hours, so that when they get out of these schools, they can immediately go in and take a tradesman test. And hopefully the school did a good enough job between all aspects of the plumbing, where they can go in there and pass these tests. And that's just going to help us. So setting the groundwork now for having the ability to test throughout the state, and then having these schools open up where they do these 2-year associate programs, we're going to see a big difference in the amount of plumbers, hopefully, but mainly the pass rate. Pass rate should go way up.
I hope so. I don't want to make no mistake about it.
I don't want to make no mistake about it. At this point in time, we are the bottleneck. Our agency is the bottleneck. And it's not because of the lack of work. I tell you, Neil and his group back there work their fingers to the bone, and he was talking to me last night about some modifications and changes they made to get more people through the system. So they're already scheduling Saturdays. They're scheduling, doing all sorts of innovative things, but you just can't shove a chicken egg down a water hose. I mean, we've just got so much capacity here, and we have got to increase our capacity in order to meet the demand. I mean, that's pretty basic. And I think by the way we're approaching this, it's doable. It's doable. So anything else from anyone? And the reason I'm asking is not for a vote, but is for direction to the staff to continue to pursue this along the lines that I've outlined today. Is the board pretty well in agreement that we should push ahead? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, board members. I appreciate it. And the book's not closed. So as things go, I want to promise you, like I say, we're changing something that's been in place for 50 years. It will not be without problem. I can assure you we're going to run into issues, but you know what? We'll fix them just as fast as they happen. There's nothing in the world that can't be done. It's just people that don't know how to do it. So we'll put the right people and we'll fix all the issues as we go forward. So be patient and you'll get continuing updates on the staff's progress on this. Is it okay with the board if we take like a 10-minute break before we start education? And when we do that, I'm going to ask Helen and Robbie, who has worked on this issue, to kind of lay out some of the drafts of what they proposed Let's adjourn until 11:45, and when we come back, we will take up item number B, number 6, item B. Okay, adjourned. 50. We're going to reconvene the meeting. Lisa is still, she's in the room with us, still trying to reconnect, but the star attractions for the next portion of the agenda are present, and that's Robbie and Helen, who are going to take up item number 6B, having to do with continuing education. One thing that I want to point out going into this and reviewing these, and we all got them just recently. Helen worked really hard to get us a rough draft yesterday. So I want to point out again, these are really rough drafts. They are subject to additional scrutiny, modifications, and changes. But the one thing that I noticed that I think there's a consensus
As a result of the emergency orders,
for include the outstanding virtual Sorry, we had some technical difficulties there, but I believe that we're all back reconnected again. Not knowing when I lost connection, I want to go ahead, I want to start over again, saying that during the emergency order, the providers did an outstanding job of putting together some virtual classes to complete the CEs. And they worked out so well. I believe that it's a consensus on the board that we make that a permanent part of our educational program going forward. And I noticed in the draft documents that Helen had provided, that's not specifically addressed. And I spoke with her this morning, and it was her suggestion, and I think it's a good one, that we handle that in the definitions of classroom, and just to be sure that that includes virtual CE classes as well as in-person and correspondence. So those are some of the things that will be worked on and will be in place prior to a formal vote on a proposal for the rules. Also, I want to say that someone noticed that there was a question from the public. Was I going to allow questions during the board meeting? And the answer is no, not until the end of the meeting. We have on our agenda item number 9, which will be public comment. And at that time, we'll open it up to the public, and any member of the public that's participating is more than welcome to ask any question on any subject. We may not be able to discuss it or respond if it's not on the agenda, but there will be, we'll allow whatever time we need. We're going to ask you to limit your comments to 3 minutes as posted on the agenda, but we want to make sure we hear from every member of the public, and you'll get an opportunity when we get to that portion of the agenda. So Helen or Robbie, I would suggest that you just take the draft proposals that were prepared and go through them one by one and just give us a synopsis of what you accomplished or what you were attempting to accomplish in your draft rules. So Robbie or Helen, either one.
Well, just first off, I just want to thank Helen for getting this rough draft out. It covers all our previous discussions and was very well done. The gist of this is we've been talking about changing our calendar year for a long time now. And so this is covering the calendar year. We're going to, proposing to move it to starting January to December 31st. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Helen, just since you drafted this, I'm going to let you just go through this and talk with the providers and let them know what's going on.
Okay, right. And so as Robbie said, him and Lisa, as well as the CPE providers, met previously and have been working on this issue for a while. Going forward, taking Sunset's recommendations, any legislation that comes in to being that's enacted. Right now, we're trying to be proactive and kind of plan depending upon where it goes, if it goes this way or that way. You'll notice in this draft that part of it in red is marked out and new language is proposed with a more general term of a registrant instead of the drain cleaner restricted, and residential utilities installer. And I'm looking at draft rule 365.14. And that says if SB 871, which I believe is the Nichols bill, becomes effective. And so we're trying to get ahead of some of the legislation that's coming out. Of course, they won't be proposed until we have that authority to formally do that, but trying to prepare so we can hit the ground running on September 1st or potentially earlier. So this rule 365.14 was actually proposed in the Texas Register, and it should be ready for adoption at the next board meeting. So what's in black was the strike through, the underline, and the brackets. That was what was proposed already. The red would be a minor change to what has already been in place. And you'll notice that we use the word an apprentice training course. And that's because in statute, it actually separates CPE and training for registrants. And so that's a distinction that we've kind of been lumping together, but they're actually separate in statute. And talking to Lisa, we were discussing that how when people are at different points in their career, the types of education or training they need may be different. And so a lot of it overlaps as far as conservation, health and safety, but there are some slight differences in statute. And so going forward, we're thinking of breaking that into two and kind of focusing on what someone who's in an earlier part of their career needs versus someone who's in a master or a journeyman, someone in the later part of their career, what they need as far as that training or continuing education to get them to those higher levels of licensure. So that was kind of the idea behind this first rule. Robbie, I don't know if you have any comments or you want to jump in with anything with that.
No, just keep going. You're covering it well.
Okay. And I will say, I'm excited to have this discussion with everyone because of the volume of changes we'll be making, not just because of Sunset, the legislature, but also it's our quadrennial rule review that's required under the Texas Government Code. Every 4 years, you have to look back at your rules, see if they still apply. Does it make sense to change them? How do we go forward? So it's all coming together, and we'll need to look at how the different parts work together. And as Frank said, either updating some of our definitions. And I think maybe the organization of some things, you'll notice some of our rules are very long. One thing I'd like to do is kind of streamline it, because these aren't just for board staff or board members. They're not even just for licensees, they're for the general public. And so as we move towards a more computer-based society, what does our table of contents look like? Are they easily searchable? Where would someone find what they are looking for? So if there's a member of the public who has a question, that way they can easily find what they need to within our rules, or someone who's thinking about applying to become a licensee, that way they can know what they need. And so I think thinking about how we organize the rules generally to be more usable and friendly for the public to find the information that they need is something I also want to keep in mind while we're going ahead and doing this anyways. Okay, so I think that was 14 that we looked at. The next one would be 365.15. This has to do with course materials for continuing professional education. It talks about a list of approved subjects that the board publishes. And we were thinking of adding that list, just go ahead and listing it in the rule instead of making someone have to go and reference another document. So I know that list is very long. It encompasses a number of topics. I want to say there's at least 30. So either describing them more broadly or at least listing them in one place, so we're not asking someone to go to another place when they're trying to find an answer.
Also, could we possibly add it as an appendix? Reference it and add it as an appendix?
That's a good idea. We could have a little graphic that listed as well. This was also something that Sunset, I'll say, kind of dinged us on. They wanted us to get out of the business of having such specific information and requirements. And I think staff is happy to go ahead and do that. So you'll notice a number of things are kind of crossed out, and we'll hopefully just be keeping the essentials of this rule. Okay, and Robbie, if there's anything you want to add, feel free to chime in.
No, again, you're doing a wonderful job. I appreciate you doing the work for me.
Well, I think you and Lisa did a lot of it. I'm just putting the final touches on it.
Yeah, I look forward to hear the public comments, and then we can see, maybe we can do some action on this at our next board meeting.
Yes.
And I want to add too, I've said it once, but I will say it again. Helen didn't just start fresh, coming up with her own ideas. She took the information and that you had provided as a result of your workshop and Lisa's participation, and has tried to incorporate it into a rough draft to include all that. So it's remarkable to me that she got up to speed and had such a big grasp of it in such a hurry. So push ahead, and also realize, board members, I know I haven't had time to adequately read and analyze these and the consequences of them. So as either weigh in today if something jumps out at you that you want to give Helen direction to modify or address, or wait until after the meeting and get with Helen to clarify and answer any questions that you have on modifications along with the public. So Helen, go ahead. I'm sorry to have interrupted.
No, just along those lines, I think we'll be giving people my email, and we'll be putting these up on the web. That way we can get those comments and incorporate more of them into this process. And then of course that is separate and above and beyond what's required under the law and the usual proposal and comment period. So the public will have numerous opportunities to point out their thoughts and comments. 365.17 has to do with improving course instructors and continuing professional education programs. As Robbie and Lisa pointed out, that first main rule, changing the CPE year, is going to have an impact on how staff approves providers, publishers, and the course instructors. And so some of this is just cleaning up those meeting dates, rearranging them, or another option we've kind of talked about is perhaps leaving them off and putting the date, excuse me, on the application form itself. And so as rules are meant to be generally applicable, I'm not sure that we need that level of detail in a rule. Whereas if we put it on an application, it might give us some flexibility to give us more time. And then if we decide we don't need as much time, we can move that date further out. And so that would allow us to make that change internally without having to go back to the board and through the rule review process that takes quite a bit of time because of the proposal requirements, the public comment period, and then as well as the formal adoption. So it's an extended time period required in rule. I think Frank has kind of directed us to try and streamline things. And so unless it's really important, if we can kind of cut down on some of those details, it'll give staff a little bit more flexibility.
She's got a huge task. She's got to make these where I understand them. And I'm challenged. So you got a big job.
She's up to it.
Okay, and moving on to 365.18, this talks about publishers of course materials for continuing professional education programs. It also talks about course instructors towards the end. I was thinking if possible, maybe we break this into two rules. So if you're a course provider, you know which rule to look at. If you're a course instructor, you know which rule to look at. Of course, there's changes due to the CPE course year being changed. And then a lot has to do with sunset, recommending that we just don't get too involved in the details, really roll back some of the requirements to only what is necessary. And so, you know, as far as whether they have the authority, whether it's copyrighted, you know, that's their responsibility as a publisher. And so really putting that on them. So that's kind of the thought with taking out some of this.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you be both a course provider and a course instructor? Because I think they're out there today.
I think one of the things, and I'll let Lisa or Robbie jump in, is that we really wanted to expand the number of course providers, course instructors, publishers. That was something Sunset pointed out, that there was a limited number. Of course, that increases the cost for our licensees. And so we want to really open this up, and we're hoping that by removing some of this extraneous regulation, that it entices other people to come into this area and provide our licensees and registrants with quality continuing education.
Thank you.
Push ahead.
You're welcome. Okay, and going on to 365.19, something else Sunset talked about was how the courses were delivered, whether it was a single day or 2 days, the time period, the limiting of students. This might be something we need to look at, especially as we redefine classroom to be in person or virtual. So I'd be interested to hear y'all's thoughts on that. You know, 45 to 49 seems quite a bit. Another thing that came up was advertising. The board is statutorily prohibited from prohibiting advertising unless it's false, misleading, or deceptive. I think if we allowed some advertising, maybe a cover or the back, that may allow for some cost reduction in the price of the materials. And so again, this is something where we only want to do what's required and kind of stay out of the details, especially in a way where it may have a positive impact on our licensees or registrants' pocketbooks. So that's a suggestion that's in there.
Sounds like if you're going to give the the power to the providers and the publishers to do what they want, they're absolutely going to want to help offset their costs with advertising or some other forms of revenue to help them. So that sounds like a slippery slope to me.
Right, and I think we'd want to be clear that the instructional time needs to be focused on course content. I know there's usually break periods or lunch periods, and at other continuing education, you can't require someone to stay there, but if somebody wants to hand you out a free pen or something, I think that sort of thing is usually allowed. So I know it would be new for us, for our agency to kind of roll back some of those prohibitions, strong prohibitions on advertising. But I think it might be something to look at, and like you said, that slippery slope, what is appropriate and what is not appropriate for the board to discuss and make that determination.
I'm for one, am not opposed to rolling that back. We don't need to allow it, but we don't need to prohibit it either. I mean, to me, that's their business. Unless it affects the licensee or the provider's delivery of an education system, I don't really see it. Who cares? If it helps the provider, so be it.
The only thing that we had discussed previously, as the course providers every year have to come up with their different topics, an interesting thought is possibly allowing a manufacturer, like a tool manufacturer with a specific type tool, to come in and do a 30-minute or 45-minute training on that tool, not necessarily marketing that tool, but actually teaching them how to use something that's new out there. So that's something we may want to look at. Again, they wouldn't be technically they're promoting it because it's their tool that they're showing, but we wouldn't allow them to do marketing and things like that. It would strictly be instructional.
Something to add here, just knowing a little bit about the real estate license. Their continuing ed is like ours, right? They have to have so many hours, but they do lunch and learns where they'll have a software company that they partnered with for MLS, how to work with the MLS system or moving documents through the system for a loan, for a transaction, have counted as continuing ed through Texas Real Estate Commission. So I think that there's already some sort of course that's set that we could follow that would make it easier for more training in the field. For example, here at my company, we go through training for almost said the name, different tankless providers on how to diagnose them, pull them apart. And, they're giving us a certificate that says to the customer, we're trained level 3, whatever on the system. So I think that should definitely count, even if it's 2 hours after work. It should all add up and benefit the license or the licensee.
That's definitely something to look at, because I know I myself have been through a lot of those so-called certification classes and on various components of plumbing, and they've been, very educational. They take some time. They're very thorough. They are, in a way, marketing a product, but still, they're very thorough about it. And we can consider in the future, based on a certificate or whatever, applying some of those hours somehow. Right now, I don't see it happening as of yet because we have the 6-hour requirement. Now, what are you going to do? Someone has 2-hour training and then you're going to let them just come for 4 hours. We need to work through those bugs, but that's a good point, Ben. There's a lot of certification programs out there that, you know, even if we did, and I don't know if this is legal or not, Vina, you may want to correct this, but, you know, even if they came in, you know, it's usually a lunch that the provider provides. We could do a lunch and learn. They could carve out, instead of a 30-minute lunch, a 1-hour lunch where the provider, I mean, the agency or company brings in lunch for everybody and then does a lunch and learn with them. And that could be part of that 6-hour curriculum. So that's another option that we, you know, Helen and I, and we'll definitely take a look at that kind of stuff.
I will too. Mr. Dahl knows I'll take a look at that issue as well.
Yeah, make sure that it's okay for them to bring, if they bring in lunch. I know the limit's $10 right now, and that'll get them some pizza. But, you know, let us know how that works.
Will do.
Thank you.
Well, I just have to say, I mean, whatever happens going forward, Frank and the team, these ideas are out of the box. And
Way out.
if the licensed plumber is watching this right now, they should feel very good about our direction, and that they should also know that their input is of utmost importance, especially on the continuing ed side, the providers and the publishers, because I mean, it sounds like to me, you know, we're enabling them to create a marketplace without a whole lot of regulation, except for what we're responsible for at our particular level. But I mean, this all sounds real good as a guy in the field.
Okay, as the third industry person here, I agree with both of you. I think there's so much new technology out there. It's imperative that we have people trained how to use technology, and it should count toward your CE hours in some form or fashion. So I know it, like you said, you can't do anything right now, but it's something we definitely need to take a look at in the future.
Okay, thank you all for your feedback. This is really exciting and a good direction, I think, for me to take back to discuss with Vina and see what we can do about this. I know, you know, the new technologies, the issues with energy conservation due to the winter storm recently. I think this will be an exciting place to move forward. And I was going to say, you know, we're not reducing the number of CE hours. The public's health and safety is our utmost priority, but after that, you know, making sure that our licensees are, you know, well-educated comes next, and can continue and be successful in their chosen field. So that's kind of our focus after public safety, is to make sure our licensees have the information they need.
Let me just add something else. You know, there's a big long-term effect on taking these actions. If the plumber, which we all know, the plumber in general says CE is a waste of time. Okay. I don't find it to be a waste of time because I learned something new when I talk to different people and hear what's going on in their worlds. So this is going to give those guys an opportunity to learn basically on their terms. They're the guys in the field, right? The owners are looking at it from a different perspective, but the majority of the licensees are the tradesmen, the journeymen, the apprentices. If we can make it fun for them, maybe they'll say, hey, you know, my friend Johnny wants to be a plumber too. Maybe he should come work for us. And so you can build the base organically by making it interesting. It's kind of like online school right now. My 15-year-old daughter is doing much better staying at home for whatever reason than she does going to school. And it's because she has the time to learn. And I think that generation is more prone to looking at a phone or looking at a screen than my generation, or even the generation of my father, who, where there's a lot of demographic in this industry that's 60 to 75. They're weaning themselves out, you know, through mortality or retiring or whatever, but there's still a lot of those guys out there. We need to make it fun for them too. Just my 2 cents.
No, I think that's a good point. We don't want to limit what people are used to. If they like the continuing education they've been provided, we still want that to be available, but we do want to open it up to other methods and new ideas to reach those different demographics who you described are used to or would prefer to receive information in different ways. And so just kind of make it more available in more formats for everyone.
I like it. It's good thinking.
Okay, and then lastly, I think the last one I took a look at was 365.20, and this has to do with course instructors for continuing professional education programs. And there was a slight change at the end from requiring them to announce to the students the information about if they have a complaint with the course. And again, this, if it exists in one rule, to kind of keep hammering on it and other rules, this would just make it consistent. It wouldn't do away with their ability to make those complaints, but since we're putting more of the responsibility, less hand-holding back onto the course providers and instructors, just kind of doing away with some of this specific requirements was the thought behind that. And
No,
one
just-
other,
Let me say something. Just as a general observation, I'm shocked when I read this as an outsider looking in, the level of detail and explicit requirements for instructors. I can't believe that there's one paragraph in the statute about us having continuing education and 48 pages of rules that we've come up with. I'm going to be interested to see where the industry is on some of these requirements that are found in here. I find it astronomical, the requirements of instructors, and quite frankly, consider really excessive. So I will be really interested in what kind of response we get from the providers and the instructors with respect to 365.20. So, you're talking to a chairman who believes the best rule is the one that was done away with.
And I will say that Lisa had a great idea to instead include in our applications for our course providers or course instructors, a list of things where they, will adhere to the different requirements. And so it'll be a list of things that they're required to do to, make sure and accurately document attendance. If someone leaves in the middle, not to give them credit for that, to make sure that they're, an hour is an actual hour, all these things, and to make them go ahead and sign off that they will do that, because that will be another way that we can hold them accountable if the course instructors are not meeting their duties under the statute and the rules.
But aren't we doing that already?
I don't know that we have a specific form. If we do hear about anything through the complaint process, but I think it's a good thing to let them know upfront that this is what's going to be expected of you and to have them sign off on it. So there's no question about it later on. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to talk about. I think the chair did a good job of talking about Chapter 363. Of course, there's various bills that are going to be coming into play. But we were talking about the examination. I think 363.18, our description of our examination, depending upon what bills come into play, will need to be updated so we can talk about third-party testing locations and how that'll work. So there's a variety of rules in 363 that'll probably be changed as well, whether residential utilities or drain cleaners remain or go away. Those are found in 363.12 and 363.14. The examinations kind of described in 363.16 through 18. So all of those we'll get some drafts out for you guys to look over as well as the public. But I just wanted to mention that because it was discussed earlier.
With your knowledge of one of the bills, I can't remember which one it was here now, where they want to remove the responsible title and just make it a master and get a plumbing contractor's license. How does that play into this particular statute, do you think?
I think that's going to require a number of changes in our rules to meet those changes. I don't know exactly how it'll play into it.
Ben, I think the best thing to do is worry about that when it happens.
Exactly. I was just playing devil's advocate.
Well,
Yeah, okay.
Well, they're not currently in the bills proposed, so we'll just have to wait and see how that works out.
Helen, anything else?
Well, I guess one particular thing, Frank, you raised this morning was how we handle veterans. And that was one of these other things talking about the organization of the chapter. I want to make sure that it's extremely friendly for them to find and reference what they need. And so I think you'll notice some of the CPE was kind of struck out. We do have the ability to grant an exemption from CPE if the board determines it's in the public interest. And of course, if someone is deployed or called up to active duty, if they're in the reserves, we would want to probably go ahead and make that exemption from the required CPE. And so, some of the things, it's not that we necessarily want to get rid of it. It's more that we want to rearrange and make it more user-friendly. So I just wanted to keep that in mind in case you're looking through. And if you have any questions about something, the same with some of the definitions. It's not that we don't want to do a virtual classroom, but sometimes our rules are several pages long, and it would be much easier if we just, discuss some things, got some things out of the way, and then we could have a simpler, more concise rule. Okay, that's all I have. Might be a good time, Helen, to give your contact information, because as I said, we're going to put these on some type of Google link where the public can take a look at it, and the providers specifically. And I have no doubt they're going to have some response and questions. You weren't here at our last meeting, but one of the things I want to ensure is that every public comment that the board, every member of the board get a copy of every public comment prior to us making a proposal at the next meeting, so that we can take those into consideration before we make a decision on it. So if you'll provide where they can get in touch with you to comment on these rules. Yes, I'm sorry, I had to shoo DIR out of my office. They're going to set up my phone. You may have noticed earlier, but you can reach me by email. My email is helen.kelly@tsbpe.texas.gov. And I'll go ahead and spell my name. It's HELENKELLEY.
Thank you, Helen. Robbie or Helen, either, do you have any further comments before we proceed?
No, I think we just get this out there, wait for the comments, and then see what kind of tweaking we need to do. And then see what kind of tweaking we need to do. See how many of these rules we can get rid of, to shorten this thing, and go with what your vision is.
Okay. Helen?
Nothing further, no. Thank you.
Sorry. Now I'm unmuted. Thank you both for the work that you've done. Again, I want to reiterate, these are first rough drafts of some proposals. So when the public is commenting, whether it be providers or the public, feel free to let us have it. If you see something there that we did not address that you would like addressed, now is the time to share those with us, because we are at our next meeting. We hope to have in final form rules that we can formally vote on as proposals to post in the Texas Register. And you're going to get another bite out of the apple. Like I say, you're getting an extra bite this month. And after we propose the rules, you'll get another 30-day period to offer additional comments. So you're getting 2 bites of what normally you would get 1. So this is your chance to shape the rules before they ever get voted on as proposals. So thank you both. Discussion, item number 7, discussion regarding date, time, and location next board meeting. If it meets with the board's approval, we had hoped to meet in 30 days, but I think 30 days fell about the time the freeze hit Texas, and the staff really was overwhelmed with the work. So we are a little bit delayed, but with the board's agreement, I would like to, let's another 30 or 40 days, let's schedule another board meeting that hopefully these rules will be done and ready for us to consider as proposals, and just let the staff contact you to arrange a date. Did that work okay for the board members this time? Okay, that's what we'll do then. Recommendations for future board meeting agenda items. I think you've been hearing the last hour or so what's going to be on our agenda coming up. A couple of ready proposals to vote on. So I would anticipate that will happen. Also, in keeping with our practice, this next board meeting, we will hear from staff and get staff reports in addition to this. So as you recall, we're giving the staff a break and not asking them to meet with us every month to produce all these reports and information that they do. But this will be the second. So the staff will be back on for our next meeting. So,
Chairman,
yes, sir.
will we still be disseminated that information, even though it's not being presented at a board meeting?
Which information is that?
This in the stuff that we would normally get.
The
that we're not
statistical
seeing.
stuff. You know, no, there's no plan to do that, because I don't think that the staff especially prepares a lot of those reports for our
Gotcha.
board meeting.
Okay.
So it'd be defeating the purpose to ask them to prepare them and distribute them. So you'll be seeing those reports every other board meeting rather than every board meeting.
Okay, no problem. Thanks.
If you've got a specific question, obviously direct it to Lisa and you can get it answered. So,
Thanks.
okay, let's move now to item number 9, and that puts us in the public comment realm. Kevin, I'm hoping that you're going to be able to identify who would like to make public comment, and I'm going to just let you, if you will, identify them and call on them.
Yes, absolutely. Our first comment is from Sarah Rayburn of PHCC Texas. Ms. Rayburn, you can go ahead and speak.
Hi, thank you. This is Sarah Rayburn from the Plumbing, Heating, Cooling Contractors Association. I had just registered as a resource, but also wanted to thank the board for all of your work. I know that things have been very busy and an incredible amount of work has been done. So just wanted to say our thanks to you.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for being here. Hey, and thank you also, Sarah, for lending your facility for us to expand our testing facilities.
Okay, and next up is Bobby. Bobby, go right ahead.
I'm glad to see everybody. We enjoyed a WSBS class going on here, so they're participating for the first time. A few things that we talked about, and you talked about Waco and Buda and places like that, but Dallas and Fort Worth and Houston, I think, should be the prime spots to start the practical exam portion, if that's what you're going to do as a test, because of all the people up here and down in the Houston area is my suggestion. The other thing is, and I've said this before, is I really think it's important, like they're sitting in here for 3 days taking this WSPS. That should be their continuing ed that year. The same thing with the apprentices going to their classes, their code courses, or the OSHA courses that we do with that, the med gas courses and stuff like that. That should all be included within that continuing ed. And I've said that before, and I feel very strong about that. I want to thank the board. I think you did an excellent job. I really believe that we're on the right track. And I will be writing a letter. Don't worry about that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bobby.
All right, and up next is Mr. Matthew Nguyen. Mr. Nguyen, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Board. I'm as a resource only as well. Just want to say, as several of the conversations we've had, I'm very encouraged by the fresh perspective on all of these rules. So I look forward to seeing the details and very supportive of the direction we're going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nguyen.
Okay, and it looks like that's it, unless if any of the public has any more comments. Okay, yeah, we got them rolling in here. Mr. William Hayberger, go right ahead.
Here we go. Thank you, Chairman Denton, for allowing me to speak today. I missed the first meeting you shared. I was very impressed when I watched the video. I think you brought some new vigor to the board. I'm really impressed with the entire board, the meetings that I've watched and the meeting today, with how you all are getting involved and taking some corrective measures on things that needed to be corrected. I'm here to help, do whatever I can. I ditto what Bobby said about continuing education requirements, and other things besides just what's in that book need to count towards continuing education. I mean, there's so many fields out there we could open up to be taught in continuing education class, be acceptable. It just makes your head swim. What I would really like to see is a laundry list. And it was mentioned by someone earlier, maybe a short, in 1 hour increments. Let them pick and choose from a list over that 12 months they're going to be allowed to get their continuing education, to pick from, various topics, things that are of interest to them. I'd like to see us start specializing in things, for apprentices, tradesmen, journeymen, masters, RMPs, inspectors. We all got different interests in the trade. It's so broad. It's just amazing the subject can be taught. We can make continuing education where it's fun to everyone and enjoyable and beneficial. Again, thank you for sharing the board, and I'm willing to help any way I can.
Sir, for your comments and your participation.
Okay, if anyone else from the public would like to speak, please raise your digital hand by clicking raise hand at the bottom of the screen. We'll give it just a couple seconds here and see if anyone else raises their hand. Mr. Denton, I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
Okay, public comment section gone. Obviously, if you didn't comment today, we really need your public comment with respect to these rules. It's your industry, and we can't go forward without your help. So, board members, are there any other items that need to be covered today before we make a motion for adjournment? All right, thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn? Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for your participation.